Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be discussing the concept of 19 in the Qur'an in an attempt to provide a new perspective and dispel the myths surrounding what the Qur'an actually says. I want to preface this video by saying this is just a personal perspective and is not meant as a polemic against those who are sincerely striving on the very same path to understand the Qur'an using its ayat first and foremost. I titled this Hijacked by 19 in reference to another deception 24 years ago using the very same number. By the end of this video, I hope to discuss why I feel this is ultimately a gate-kept explanation crafted by Shaytān. And if you choose to listen until the end of the video, you will understand why this 19 code word has gained traction at all. So without further ado, let's dive in. The famous 19 ayah comes from Qur'an, surah 74, ayah 30 and 31. And pretty much all interpretations of these two ayahs all revolve around the same conclusion. And we have the translations to thank for this. Over it are 19, and we have not made the keepers of the fire except angels, and we have not made their number except as a trial for those who disbelieve. The entire understanding from these two ayahs, at least from the official translations, is that the 19 number refers to angels that are keepers of the fire, aka hell. That is the official explanation. And the classical view from Islamic accepted mainstream history, from three different interpretations of the Qur'an, namely from Tafsir at-Tabari, where he mentions that scholars have disagreed whether the number 19 is literal or metaphorical, but the dominant view is that it's literal and that there are literally 19 angels guarding hell. From Al-Qurtubi, he elaborates that these angels are mighty and terrifying, led by the angel Malik. Their number was considered small by some disbelievers, leading them to mock the idea, which is part of the trial, or fitna. Tafsir Ibn Kathir adds that this emphasizes the fitna or test aspect and warns against scoffing at divine revelation. He stresses that only the God knows the reality and forces behind his command. So this is the official Islamic view by mainstream Muslim authorities regarding these two ayahs and their interpretation. Alternative views have emerged in reaction to this, but they don't really provide anything further, given that the numerological view, or the Code 19 theory as it were, famously proposed by Rashad Khalifa in the 1970s, posits that 19 is a mathematical code embedded throughout the Qur'an's structure, such as its chapters, verses, and letters. He doesn't deny, of course, that there are 19 angels in hellfire, but he says that the number itself can be found all throughout the Qur'an in various ways, and he claims that this proves the divine authorship of the Qur'an, given the intricacy of this code, allegedly referenced as 19 in these ayahs. I add an intertextual view with Jewish and Christian texts just to show you that this idea is not unique to Islam, that many such esoteric number codes have been found in holy texts outside of the Qur'an, and scholars have noted that angelic gatekeepers of hell appear in Jewish apocalyptic literature as well. The number 19 might be referencing shared imagery familiar to Jews and Christians, fulfilling the part of the verse about those given the scripture. So these are the alternative views to the mainstream Islamic narrative. Some things about Code 19 that I find interesting is that to make the 19 theory work, that being that Code 19 has to have consistency throughout all of the ayahs revealed and understood to be divinely revealed from Allah. Khalifa actually claimed that the last two verses of Surah 9, Surah At-Tawbah, are forgeries. So that means that ayahs 128 and 129 of Surah At-Tawbah are actually not part of the Qur'an and rather are just mistakes. The complex codes that should account for the entirety of the Qur'an's ayahs does not account and cannot be explained. It doesn't work with these two last verses, which is pretty convenient for something that's supposed to be proof of divine authorship in these circles. We also find that complex codes are nothing really divine, actually, because they can exist in man-made systems, like cryptography, for example, or poetry or literature. Famous literature like the Bible, which is not even claimed to be from divine authorship, but quote-unquote inspired by God, written by the hands of men, and compiled by the hands of men, also have complex codes like this kind that Rashad Khalifa posits for the Qur'an. Numerical analysis isn't actually exclusive to holy texts, and you can find similar patterns in Shakespeare, Moby Dick, and even telephone books. So clearly we can see that Khalifa only counted what supports his theory using confirmation bias. Really, the most important takeaway from this lesson is that his followers now suggest that the 19 code can be used to clean up the text, as if the Qur'an has many mistakes in it, determining the authentic qira'at and weeding out the human additions and fixing the spelling errors, and so on and so forth. So actually, when you think about it, the Qur'an actually is already assumed to not be divinely authored, because the Code 19 theory and its flaws demands that it throws out sections of the Qur'an, most notably these two removed verses from Surah 9, those being 128 and 129. These are the last two ayahs of Surah At-Tawbah. By Rashad Khalifa's own admission, one of the reasons for removal is actually historical, given that he gives credibility to the hadith corpus. And one such hadith is from Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith 4311. The words of Zayd ibn Thabit, quote, "I found with Khuzaymah two verses of Surah At-Tawbah which I had not found with anybody else," end quote. Another non-historical, non-19 code-based excuse for removing two verses from Surah At-Tawbah are the words Ra'uf and Rahim, being alleged to be solely divine attributes. And since these are used for Allah in many other verses, such as, Inna Allah Ra'ufun Rahim, they must be exclusive to Him. Ayah 128, from their interpretation, suggests that the messenger is described as such, and so it contradicts with the other ayahs that use these attributes for Allah. The addition of verses emphasizing the Prophet's mercy and compassion seem to contradict the surah's otherwise severe tone. So this is given actually an emotional argument, as if they know exactly what Allah meant to say, and thus the Code 19 is validated by removing something that we already understand to be part of the Qur'an in every way. Adherents of the Code 19 now suggest that the 19 code can be used to clean up the text and weed out the human additions and determine the authentic qira'at, of which there are so many that they all conflict with each other. If the Divine Code 19 requires human intervention to make the Qur'an pure again, then a couple of conclusions can be drawn. One, the Qur'an is already assumed to not be preserved, because there isn't a single Qur'an that doesn't use those two ayahs in its text. And two, the math clearly can't validate anything reliably or consistently to give a actual pattern that works in every case across the text. And three, Khalifa's method doesn't actually support any qira'at. It actually just supports his own edited recitation and version of the Qur'an that demands that those two ayahs have to be thrown out. This reminds me of a ayah in the Qur'an, surah 4, ayah 82. Then do they not reflect upon the Qur'an? If it had been from any other than Allah, they would have found within it much contradiction. The idea that contradiction in the Qur'an, in Arabic, is the same word for variance is probably very profound, because that suggests that the Qur'an has no variance in it. And it's completely hypothetical to suggest that there are any Qur'anic variant readings or variant recitations, let alone demanded variations by arbitrary codes and numerological patterns. That brings us to this ayah that seems to be used as an evidence to corroborate the idea that there are appointed angels in hellfire. And this is the official translation. O you who have believed, protect yourselves and your families from a fire whose fuel is people and stones, over which are appointed angels, harsh and severe. They do not disobey Allah in what He commands them, but do what they are commanded. So the classical interpretation of this ayah is as follows. Tafsir al-Tabari says that this is a command to believers to shield themselves and their households from hell by obeying Allah and teaching their families to do the same. The fuel of hell is disbelievers and idols, which is what the stones refers to, that were worshipped. Hell is guarded by stern angels who are completely obedient and carry out Allah's punishment without hesitation. Tafsir al-Qurtubi and Ibn Kathir both agree that you're responsible for your family's moral and religious upbringing, not just your own salvation. People and stones are interpreted as idols worshipped by the pagans. The angels of punishment are referred to as Zabaniya. So the Zabaniya is a word mentioned in Surah Al-Alaq, which interestingly enough is agreed upon to be the very first surah, at least partially, to be transmitted to the Prophet Muhammad in the official history by Jibreel in the cave of Hira. This is believed to refer to the angels guarding hell by practically all Muslims, including the Code 19 adherents, not just from Rashad Khalifa's camp, but other Code 19 affirmers in other Islamic and quasi-Islamic sects. Surah Al-Alaq is also believed to be the very first surah revealed to Muhammad, as I mentioned, and interestingly enough, it has exactly 19 ayahs. When counted from the end of the Qur'an, Surah 96 is the 19th surah, and stern angels or wardens or keepers are assigned to guard and punish in hell. They are described as gruesome in appearance in Islamic scholarship, with Malik as their leader. Scottish Orientalist H.A.R. Gibb recorded a tradition that suggests that these angels are actually made of a different substance, fire instead of light. Muslim scholars do not universally accept this, and they say that the angels of hell in Surah 66:6 were created from anger, and that tormenting creatures to them is like food for the children of Adam. Some consider them to be the hell's angels' subordinates. Arabic grammar experts have described the pushing movement of the Zabaniya being like a scorpion's pincers or kelai, and the word Zaban was used in Arabic to describe the claws of the constellation Scorpius. The number of Zabaniya as 19 is understood to be recorded in the Qur'an and Hadith Qudsi. One of Asbab al-Nazul for ayah 7430, which is referring to the reasons or methods of revelation, the context of the ayah being revealed, refers to a historical event allegedly when a group of Jews asked some of the Prophet's companions, "Does your Prophet know the number of the angels who guard hell?" They reply, "We will ask him." When they inquired, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Yes, they are 19. He then revealed the verse, "Over it are 19 angels." Surah Al-Mudaththir 74:30. So the idea of the angels in hell is clearly understood historically to be from Judaism. even by this particular context for the ayah's revelation. And what's interesting is that various Islamic scholars note the elaborate attributes of the Zabaniya, such as sickeningly ugly faces, enormous size, carrying tools such as iron beaters and a whip made of fire, the most powerful among the angels, and possessing fingers which are equal to the number of the sinners thrown into hell after Judgment Day, according to one called Tawus ibn Kaysan. I want to highlight that the idea that hell is actually populated is not during Judgment Day, when the judgment is taking place, but after Judgment Day. And interestingly enough, we get this information from one of the alleged first 3 generations of the Salaf, who just so happens to have the name Tawus or Peacock ibn Kaysan. We get an idea from Christianity as well in the Bible that scorpions are connected to the hellfire, as similarly we have these kind of punishing angels in Judaism as well. In Revelation 9:10, which has the numbers 9:1 in there as well, it says, "They had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months." These are understood to be demonic locusts that emerge from the bottomless abyss called Abaddon. Interestingly enough, Allah talks about this very same idea when He references hell in Surah Al-Jinn, ayah 23, خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا. So clearly the word Abaddon in the book of Revelation, Christianity today, has some relevance as a phonetic residue of the Arabic word abadan, which means evermore. Because hellfire from the Qur'an is understood to be an eternal abode, not a temporary one as is thought in Sunni Islam. Modern Orientalist and Islamic expert Frederick S. Colby has recorded the description from traditional exegesis that God has made hardness into each of the Zabaniya angels' hearts, so they may have no mercy toward the inmates. That's rather interesting because the hardened hearts in the Qur'an refers to people that disbelieve during the worldly life, so they do not understand and their hearts become blind. Muhammad al-Bukhari of Sahih al-Bukhari fame, in his own commentary in his collection of hadiths regarding the afterlife, called Barzakh, he added that the Zabaniya inflict punishment towards people that commit riba or usury. This is actually interesting because in the Qur'an in Surah Al-Baqarah, in ayah 275, it suggests that Shaytān is the one who beats people who consume the riba, not angels. We also have a rabbi, early convert to Islam in the official history, called Ka'b al-Ahbar. For some reason, his name is Ka'b of the rabbis, but regardless, he narrates a long tradition of the Zabaniya being tasked with gathering and suppressing all sinners, both Muslims and non-Muslims, during Judgment Day. This would actually be interesting if the angels do this, but it does seem to me that Shaytān is the one that is tasked with doing this exact thing, the one that has authority over everyone except the mukhlasin. He will mislead them all. Famous Islamic exegete Ibn Kathir comments on a hadith from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud that whoever wants to be saved from the torture after Judgment Day, again, after Judgment Day, not during Judgment Day, should recite the Bismillah frequently during their life, as it consists of 19 letters, in accordance with the Zabaniya's number. I wonder, did maybe Ibn Kathir or Abdullah ibn Mas'ud follow Rashad Khalifa? Because they seem to have an obsession with this concept of 19 way in the early days of Islam, and it didn't really just come in the 1970s with a Rashad Khalifa character. Colby quoted some Isra and Mi'raj traditions that the fiery seas within the first layer of hell is explained by Malik, the leader of the Zabaniya, to Muhammad, that the Zabaniya were created by God inside hell, so they have no desire to leave this place and feel comfortable within it. The Saudi scholar Abdurrahman as-Sa'di explained that the Zabaniya are standing tall above Saqar. In Tafsir Ibn Kathir, the Zabaniya force-feed those in hell from fruits of the Zaqqum tree. The reason I present this information is maybe to give you a better idea of maybe this doesn't describe what the Quran considers al-malaika as much as you might at first think. And it could very well be describing something in the Quran, another race of beings and species that seems to populate hell just as much as humans do as well. It has been argued that the term may have denoted a class of pre-Islamic demons, as mentioned by poetress convert Al-Khansa. Interesting name for a poet, given that in the last surah of the Quran, we have this term Al-Khannas that comes after the concept of Shaytān, the waswas, the whisperer. Al-Khansa mentioned that Zabaniya in one of her poems are supernatural creatures similar to Sa'ali, a type of jinn from Arabian folklore, meaning treacherous spirits of invariable form. They belong to a malicious class of jinn described as talented shapeshifters, often appearing in human form and female. So they masquerade as human females. They are also said to seduce and marry men, and also have interspecies relations with humans. I wonder where I've heard this before in the Quran. We'll look at that in a minute. Al-Mubarrad, a 9th century scholar from the school of Basra in Iraq, he associates Zabaniya with demons. He actually states that they are afarit, a type of underworld demon, and that they were sometimes called Ifriya Zibniya. If you know from the Quran, there is actually a mention of an Ifrit in the Quran as well. Ifrit are explicitly mentioned as being from the jinn. Ibn Kathir maintains his interpretation of Surah 73:31 that the guardians of hell are only from the angel race, none other. You know, it's interesting that the book of Enoch, which comes from the Hebrew word chanok or hanukkah in Arabic, just look at the reference in 1762 to figure out who uses this verb, only time that root is mentioned in the Quran. The book of Enoch mentions there were punishing angels called Satans, who act as God's executioners on both sinful humans and fallen angels. We also have a incident of revelation for Surah 96, Ayah 18, related to an incident where the Zabaniya appeared before Abu Jahl when he tried to trample on Muhammad's neck as he was praying in the Kaaba. The scholar Al-Asqalani adds that Abu Jahl described a trench filled with flames between him and Muhammad. So this is the vision that came to Abu Jahl's mind when the Zabaniya ayah was revealed. When he actually saw these creatures, he described a trench filled with flames between him and Muhammad. In Quran 96, 1-8, you can read all of these on your own time. Allah describes the human very precisely. But then, the focus changes for 96.9 to 96.19, where another entity is criticized heavily. You should just look at the words an-nasiyat. and see how that is used in 11:55 to 56, as well as 55:41. Also, this word that's also used in Surah 96, nadi. Just look at which people have these associates and what kind of crimes are they doing. I'll give you a hint. It's the people of Lut. And we also have a parallel for this word, sanada'u, in 1686, 1814, and 4074. What's very interesting about this word is that some of the descriptions by alleged early Islamic scholars have interesting submissions and parallels for Zayd ba Nun. For example, Zabun is somebody that is stupid, foolish, but also a customer, a client, a guest, or clientele. Zubaniyat are known as the claws of a scorpion or a crayfish. They can also be antennae or feelers. They can also be stingers. Zabaniya are known to be cronies, thugs, goons, of course, quote-unquote, angels of hell. But also, very strangely, you'll find an entry for myrmidons. And if you're not aware of what that is, myrmidons are a Greek mythological group of soldiers that fought with Achilles. And the etymology of this word actually goes in line with what's being described with stingers and antennae, because it actually means a group of ants or an ant's nest. I'm not sure what to make of that, but clearly the descriptions around Islam and otherwise don't really describe humans or angels in any way, other than another species of creatures that the Qur'an constantly refers to. The idea of zaba'iniya, meaning clientele or patronage or custom, could denote that these creatures, if they truly are from a class of afarit, possibly did actually have very intimate patronage and customs and clientele with a major portion of humanity in the past and possibly in the future. But that's actually a topic for another video. What I really want to get to, after going through all of the opinions around the Quran, from history, from scholarly opinion, from alternative opinion, is this notion of ashab an-nar. So, throughout all of the explanations, there is no diversity of opinion regarding the fact that these 19 are actually angels guarding the hellfire as keepers of the hellfire. However, Surah 74, Ayah 31, strangely has the word ashab an-nar. Ashab an-nar is used exactly 20 times. And in this particular circumstance, it's not translated like it is in the other 19 times. To get a full description of what ashab an-nar refers to, because this is what is actually related to the word malaikatan in this particular ayah, we see that alladhina kafaru, that are immortalized, are described as ashab an-nar. Basically, this word means companions of the fire. They're the people that are actually punished. Companions of the fire are immortals. They earned evil, and so their abode is hellfire. In Surah 5, Ayah 29, oppressors are compensated as a reward as being from the companions of the fire. So these are oppressors in the worldly life. Ashab an-nar are also those that denied the ayat of Allah. They're also immortals. Khalidina fiha abadan. Allah promises ashab an-nar that are basically composed of oppressors. He promises them the fire, and the curse of Allah is upon them. Ashab an-nar are also identified as the people of the oppressors. They're identified as the kafirin. They're forbidden Jannah. They're humans that denied the new creation because they're made from dust. And I have all the references here if you want to check for yourself. Ashab an-nar are people that made opponents for Allah. Ashab an-nar are musrifin. Ashab an-nar had assets and children. That doesn't really sound like angels. Allah says that Ashab an-nar are the losers. And so, quite strangely, out of all of the ayahs mentioned, Ashab an-nar are clearly the people punished for eternity in hellfire. So why did the translators just forget what ashab means only in this ayah, especially when the word an-nar comes after it? To avoid variance and contradiction, ashab an-nar, companions of the fire, would have to be described the same way throughout the Qur'an by examining the 20 times this phrase is used, so we can get a holistic description of all of their traits. Clearly, 7431 is important because it tells us that these immortal beings are made in angelic forms. So the question is, if Ashab an-nar are all these people that are oppressors and kafirin and musrifin and so forth, does that mean there are only 19 people in hellfire? Because the 19 is understood to be the number of these angels that are Ashab an-nar. That's exactly what they say. I mean, it says over there are 19 angels, and we have not made the Ashab an-nar except angels. So if you just substitute the word what it actually says, which is the companions of the fire, you get an entirely different picture emerge. And the whole 19 interpretation crumbles, because now the 19 doesn't actually have a unit that it measures. So there's no 19 angels anymore, because those angels are Ashab an-nar. And there's a lot more than 19 companions in eternity in the hellfire being punished. One thing I want to add is it's very important to distinguish between definite and indefinite articles when they're used in Arabic in the Qur'an. Remember, this is Allah's speech, not ours, not a jinn speech. So that means when Allah specifies any noun with a the, or leaves it vague, leaves it general with a an or indefinite article, it makes a whole world of difference. For example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 120, we see قُلْ إِنَّ هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى. This is a direct formula to show you how to understand these definite articles. Allah's guidance, or guidance of Allah, is the guidance. And of course you'd expect nothing less. The mountains would have to be Allah's mountains. The angels would have to be Allah's angels. You know, these are things that are possessed by Him, because the format of Huda Allah is idafa. It implies possession. This is something exclusively possessed by Allah that He created, so it has this signature on it. But that does not mean it's equal to Allah, as He's outside the creation, outside time and space, transcendent upon everything that's created. So, we talked about angels, malaikatan, but let's get an understanding throughout the Qur'an using ayahs as evidences to show what the malaika are. So, I picked a good sample size of ayahs here to show what al-malaika or malaikat Allah are. In many ayahs, they submit when Allah commands them. They curse the people of the oppressors. They are near to Allah. They are soldiers. They assure the believers. Those that don't hope for Allah's meeting ask why the angels are not sent down upon them. Notice these are the angels, not sent down upon those who do not believe in Allah's meeting. They do not have good news for the criminals or the kafirin. Those that serve the jinn worship them, and the angels, the malaika, deny their worship. Al-malaika are messengers. Al-malaika surround the arsh of Allah. They descend on those whose Lord is Allah. So, the malaika, they exalt their Lord by His glory. They are a type of creation no one in the creation has witnessed. They descend from heaven and they permit entry into Jannah. They take others in death. They don't have female names. They are protectors with Jibreel and Allah. The angels are associated with the ruh, or the spirit, and they are commanded by Allah, their Lord. From these ayahs, it's clear that al-malaika, or malaikat Allah, are clearly a uniquely special group of Allah's servants, given that it appears in Surah 43, ayah 19, that they predate the species with free will, jinn and ins. In Surah 7, ayah 20, it suggests that they are immortal beings. In 5679, it suggests that they are purified, immaculate beings. In 1649, it suggests that they operate outside the testable species, which are jinn and ins, in order to facilitate what Allah causes. And in 8.9, it suggests that they are soldiers, and they do as they are commanded by Allah with full precision, without hesitation, and with full execution. I put that ayah in there to show that many ayahs already attest to the obedience of angels, and that 66.6 is not necessary as a proof that malaika have no free will. Then it brings us to malaikatan. Remember, these are indefinite angels. So clearly angels represent a type of creation, a type of physical form, much like a humans represent a physical form or creation, and much like jinn do, distinct from each other. The reason I put the infinity sign is that it is interesting that the indefinite form has another translation or understanding as something without end, which is the connotation for these particular angels. Allah says in 1795, even if they were walking within the earth as malaikatan, okay? This insinuates that it wouldn't actually happen during their lifetime. In 2324, those that disbelieved from Nuh's people, they actually preferred Nuh to be an angel and not a human being. This is an impossible demand. And in 41:14, the disbelievers preferred all the messengers not to be human, but rather angels. In 43:60, Allah making humans angels, it's possible, but He specifically didn't for a reason. I want to show you that all of these ayahs that use this indefinite form of the word malaika seem to highlight a particular idea, and that is association of human beings with malaika. Which brings us to the two other ayahs of contention. Upon a fire whose fuel are men and stones, angels. Ashab an-nar are not except angels. So 66.6 doesn't suggest that there's appointment of these specially tasked al-malaika. It just uses the general form, malaikatan. Same with 74:31. It doesn't suggest there's any keepers. It says companions of the fire are angels. What does this suggest? How do we reconcile this, knowing there's no contradiction or variance in the Qur'an? No ikhtilaf. If you truly believe in the Qur'an, and don't just claim to believe, if you truly believe, we have to take this very seriously. There's no mincing of Allah's words. Ashab an-nar, that's clearly companions of the fire. That description is of a people that's punished. Human beings that are punished forever, eternally, in the fire. those same things are called malaikatan. They're not called the malaika. It's just the physical form that the malaika also have. Eternal, immortal, undying, powerful. And then strangely, for these two ayahs, we see that Allah introduces the possibility of humans turning into malaikatan. So that means it's fully within His power to do so. But why does He not do this during the worldly life? Why does He even admit that this is something that He could have done during their lives? I think the reason is obvious. The indefinite form malaikatan describes a physicality that's eternal and immortal, which would fit very well with the conditions of the akhirah, which includes hellfire. Throughout the Qur'an, Allah mentions how He could have made us malaikatan, us humans, giving the possibility of this as one of the innumerable things that are within Allah's power. The people in the Qur'an that denied their messengers, that preferred their messengers to be angels, when the messengers told them, I'm just a human like you, they get exactly what they ask for in the end. This is why this is so powerful. The 19 code deception actually veils this unbelievable revelation from the Lord of the worlds. They followed their pseudo-angel Iblis. The people of Lut, they wanted angelic males as their spouses. And so they will have to live with that for all eternity. This worship of the angelic form, of being and living forever. People who have entered hellfire in immortalized angelic bodies can be used as a fuel source. That's what Surah 66:6 suggests, if you put it all together. And this is a very painful, severe, and harsh punishment in 69:31. They wanted to extend their lifespan for 1,000 years. That's in Surah 2, Ayah 96. So they will live out eternity, doing exactly what Allah commanded them. But this time, in hellfire. This is a day which is like 1,000 years, because you can't actually enumerate it. This particular day doesn't end. It's eternal. 22:47. These are not keepers of the fire. And there's not 19 of them, because right now, that's out the window. And we're only going to unravel more as the presentation goes on. But I want you to understand this point specifically. How does it make sense that Allah wouldn't tell us the constitution of human beings in the afterlife in some way? Clearly, now, I don't condone reincarnation whatsoever. But think about it this way. Does it make sense that your current body right now, which is perishable, which is weak, can succumb to disease and imperfections in every way, nobody's an angel walking the earth? Not in the Quran, not now, not ever. So how does it make sense that something that can roast the skins and can completely punish and beat and create so much damage to these particular humans that earn this punishment, justifiably, wouldn't be in a form that maintains its integrity to be punished for eternity in some way? This is your answer. And that's why it makes sense why malaika, the malaika, which facilitate this fulfillment of Allah's plan for every man, woman, and child, and every jinn in creation. This makes sense why al-malaika are outside of the test and have no free will. Because during the akhirah, there's nothing to test. Everyone is in their right place. So there's no contradiction for them having angelic forms. The question is, where do they find themselves? Which side of history? In hell or in Jannah? So that brings us to this word. And strangely, perhaps not by coincidence, nothing in the Qur'an is by coincidence, it seems. This word is used exactly 2 times. One time, it's used in definite form, and one time it's used in indefinite form. This word means 2 angels. If you want to go to scholars or any of your alternate teachers or gurus to suggest that this word means 2 kings, that would be malikain. In the Qur'an it says malakain. I don't care what it says in the other recitations. Those things are invalidated by this Qur'an from what they try to imitate of the Qur'an. So, let me explain to you Surah 7, Ayah 20. Shaytān whispers to both Adam and his zawj, his mate, his pair, his spouse, saying, "What did your Lord forbid you both about this tree, except that you could have both become 2 angels, malakain." I'm pretty sure the word is al-malakain, one of the 2. I think it's the indefinite form there. Or you could have both become al-khalidin, the immortals. This is incredible because Shaytān has a epithet in the Quran that he attributes to himself, saying that he is from the sincere advisors, an-nasihin. Now clearly, Shaytān is a very deceptive, crafty devil. But you have to see that in the Quran, this information is critical. Because, you see, the way the Quran is revealed is that it necessitates it being absolute truth. It doesn't matter if it's from the perspective of Shaytān, or Fir'aun, or Yahud, or Nasara. Allah quotes these individuals to incriminate them, to reveal something of the truth behind their words, that they don't realize what they're saying. The 2 angels are put with an inclusive or with being immortal. So it's seen as the same thing. In the Bible, it has the word gods. So that doesn't help. But here, it says specifically 2 angels. You could say that it says 2 angels simply because there's 2 people on earth at the time. But what you fail to understand is that those 2 people populated all of the humans on earth. So really, this is actually still in application for everyone that provably considers themselves a human being, which would necessitate them being from Adam, one of his descendants. One of 2 angels for all of Adam, his zawj, and his progeny. Interestingly enough, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 102, we see the same exact reference only one other time. They pursued what the Shayātīn proceeded upon Sulaiman's kingdom, and what did Sulaiman disbelieve, and yet the Shayātīn, they disbelieved. So when you see the word الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, you have to understand that that doesn't just mean human beings. It literally means Shayātīn as well. And they teach the masses as-sihr. This word masses is the word for annas. That's used in Surah 66:6. That's the only thing actually referenced as human inhabitants of the hellfire. And what was sent down upon the 2 angels by Babil, Harut and Marut. So here we're actually given the names of the 2 angels. The 2 malakain. Okay? If we put this all together, from the information we just discussed about al-malaika, ashab al-nar, and malaikatan, we see that therefore the 2 angels represent an immortal physicality that resides in the akhirah, In fact, I didn't put it there, but Surah 2, Ayah 102 talks about exchanging the akhirah, selling it, your hereafter. Which is why Shaytān entices humanity with the prospect of angelhood. But, cleverly, deceptively, he fails to disclose that this is an inevitability for all humans. When everything is said and done, at the end of the day, when everyone gets their day in court, everyone becomes an angel. That's why it says, إِلَّا مَلَائِكَةً. This is something only the Qur'an could teach you, because it's Allah's words. Harut and Marut represent both destinations. That's why there's exactly two of them. Jannah and Jahannam. There's no other destination in the end. Just levels of those two. It is clear that Shaytān is aware that being of the immortals is inclusive. That word is aw in the Qur'an, in Arabic today. Inclusive of being two angels or angelic forms. This is why when malaikatan are mentioned specifically in the fire, it is discussing the angelic forms humans will need to have to reside in the fire forever. Not the malaika, who are ibad, servants, outside of the test. And in the end, they're just allies of those in Jannah. They're the ones that permit entry to the believers, saying salam, salam. What are they doing there in hellfire? What I find very interesting is the other side of the story. The other side of the story suggesting a association in physicality between human beings and birds and malaika, specifically the malaika. And that word is the Arabic word for wing. I don't know what to make of why that's the case, but clearly if there is some substance to what's going on here, of what we're talking about, this would explain why in 2 ayahs the word janahika is used, which means your wing, directed towards Musa. We have no idea, I mean, maybe some idea, but for me it's still unclear where that story happened. That's supposed to be in a blessed valley, a holy, sacred valley that is just unimaginably impressive and awesome and sacred. So much so that Allah speaks to Musa in first-person pronoun. We also see the word bijanahihi, meaning its 2 wings, talking about birds, defining it for us. We see the mu'mineen. These people actually are told to lower their wing. Janaha, that means wing. And of course, in 35:10, it's in plural, only once. Ajnihatin, meaning wings. This is actually an epithet of the malaika. Ulul ajnihatin. So perhaps the same thing is actually going on in Jannah. It just experienced very, very differently, as you can imagine. The same goes for the word ta'ir. Ta'ir is understood to be a bird, because the same one that says a bird has its wings, its 2 wings, that word is used in many ayahs, at least 4 here, I think 4 total, additional ayahs, where it's basically never translated as bird, but strangely as fate, because apparently one word in Arabic can have multiple meanings depending on what you feel like Allah should have said. But no, the word is bird there, connected to your fate, apparently. So, when we apply what's clear from the Qur'an, logically consistent, as you would expect the speech of the Creator to be, in 74:31 we don't have keepers of the fire anymore. Rather, we have the fire's companions. A companion, it's kind of evokes that it has an intimate relationship with something that's a scorching fire, almost like it's punished by it. these sovereigns or angels are the form they take to actually reside there. You can also put in there resident of the fire, whatever word works for you. But the idea is the difference between ashab and ahl in the Quran. For example, ashab Madian versus ahl Madian. They're talked about very differently in the Quran. And the difference is as follows. Ashab Madian are companions of this place called Madian because they don't come from there. They reside there. Whereas Ahl Madian, they do reside there and their home is there. They've been established there. So that's why they're called the family of Madian. And likewise, we see Ashab an-Nar implying that these are residents of the fire, not keepers. In the same line, we see that there's a fire that uses the masses of humanity that earn this punishment as a fuel. What kind of an angels would be a fuel for the fire? What's the purpose of that? Aren't they punishing them? Well, the reason is they just put in the word appointed there. That's it. The fire over which are these angelic forms is using these angelic form, immortalized people as a fuel. And I find it interesting that they don't really, I mean, it's not a surprise now, but they don't actually tell you why that's the case in the very same ayah, because they never actually conjugate the verbs correctly to show what's happening, what is implied in the ayah. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the word iddah, meaning something other than number as well. So this is code 666, okay? Funny that you have this code, 666, usually something that the Bible is associated with, the mark of the beast, the number of the devil. And it could just be that this is where we get this satanic number of the beast from. Now, I don't have any, reservations about this needing to mean that. I'm just showing you that clearly the people that come up with these elaborate schemes and lies and, stories for us, they're inspired by the Qur'an. I find it interesting that in describing these malaikatan, right? It says, they do not disobey Allah in what He commands them, but do what they are commanded. Almost. That's almost correct. What it actually says is they do not disobey Allah what He commanded them, and they act what they are commanded. Here's why this is important. There's no need for Allah to mention their disobedience in the present tense and His commands in past tense. If they were always obedient angels, unless these particular angels now did disobey in the past. And this disobedience happened whilst they were humans with free will. No compulsion, right? They disobeyed in the past what He commanded of them during their human existence. And the implication is that now, because of these highly sought form, angelic form, immortalized form, they're going to obey all those commands as such. And we know that's the case because Bani Israel, in the famous story of Surah Al-Baqarah, they're in complete disobedience for this command to slaughter the Baqarah. However, the command in the end of the story is fulfilled. Either way. So, the moral is, do what Allah wants when it applies to you, when you're called to do it, before it's too late. And I believe that part of that is understanding what the Quran actually means. Before Shaytān can gather and trap and collect as many humans as he can for hell. So, when you preclude the malaika, Allah's servant species, and understand that humans also have eternalized angelic forms in Jannah and Jahannam, it all makes sense why they have no escape in the end. They act what they are commanded. So he says they do not disobey Allah what he commanded them in their former life, and now they act what they are commanded in the afterlife. So clearly there's no coincidence. The 666 number, which actually strangely enough is put as a Quran code as well. It's not used as a satanic number of the beast for no reason. It's clearly a nod to the actual ayah, 666, which talks about this same thing, angels in hell, hell's angels. And this reminds of the ultimate delusion that slaves to Shaytān are under. This is what all the Shaytanic systems preach. They assume that their followers are perfect little angels, and they can do no wrong. And they have this false piety, advertised sanctimonious nature to them. Because they can do no wrong. They're beyond reproach. This is something that is just an exercise in futility. And it's a very severe warning. This fitna, it's a very severe warning. If you style yourself like an angel, okay? Not like a human, like an angel. Which you can never be, by the way. You can never be in this life that. And they constantly conflated, the messengers like Yusuf say this is an angel. Lut's people, Muhammad's people, Nuh's people. It makes perfect sense that this is a long, long endgame. Which brings me to the iddah. So, the whole 19 angels, that's out the window, because that number, if that is 19, could not possibly refer to all of the people that would earn Jahannam. It says most of an-nas, aktharahum. So that's most of the highest proportion of humanity. And that's why there's no word for number in that ayah that apparently defines the number 19 as angels in hell. It actually uses a similar related word called iddah, because the word in Arabic in the Quran is adad, provably. Those are the references there. So what does iddah mean? Iddah is understood in Islamic scholarship to be a period of time, a set of values. It's a bit nuanced, isn't it? It's not simply a number. We could use number there as a synonym, but if Allah uses the word adad somewhere else, and that does mean number, equivocally, then clearly iddah doesn't refer to the number 19 in Surah 74, ayah 30. If there was a specific number that was mentioned in 74:31, then the word used should have been adad. The word used is iddah. And that means what's being referenced is not actually a number, but a set. A set of values, a set of people, a set of any quantity, rather. That changes the understanding of the previous ayah completely. That means there's no number referenced. That means what's referenced is a set of a quantity. What have we made their set, these ashab an-nar illa malaikatan, except a fitna? It's important to note that Arabic actually distinguishes between digits, which are called arqam, in those references, and numbers which are called a'dad. Those are made from digits entirely. The number 19 is made of the digits 1 and 9. Number 21 made of the digits 2 and 1. All digits are a set of 9 numbers from 1 to 9. And now you probably caught on what the 19 is. The lowest one is 9 and the highest one, the lowest one is 1 and the highest one is 9. Where's the word for number in the ayah? Let's look at the digit 9. Because you can't tell me that something is 19. And it would be great if there was usage of this only 19 in the Quran. But no, we have the word 9 as well. That kind of seals it for me, because if I'm going to take one word, mean one thing, used in one way throughout the Quran, I can't apply that with this 19 idea. Just can't. Tis'ata, that word itself is 9. So when you look at 9, that can work as an adjective or a noun, and it can have feminine or masculine gender. What's interesting is the feminine gender that's used in 7430 is also used as 9 of something else in 2748. Tis'ata rahtin. It's interesting too, because these 9 of this rahtin are actually corrupting in the earth, which kind of gives a negative connotation to the feminine form of the word 9. So, if these 9 are upon saqar, and saqar is a punishment mentioned in the same way as hutama, or hawiya, or sijil, why would this talk about punishing angels that are not being punished? They're just doing the punishing, apparently. They're also the ones that are doomed and cursed and kafirin and oppressors as well, from ashab al-nar. We also see how Arabic enumerates its nouns precisely in just one word. For example, bahr means one sea, bahrain means 2 seas, abhur means several seas, bihar means a total number of seas, a collective of it. So, what's interesting about this is that the feminine for the number 9, which will have to mean 9 across the Quran, because there's no change in the word itself, that's just the number 9. It's used to describe a noun called rahtin, which is not a number at all. And it's used in association with a noun in 2748. So to be consistent with the word's meaning, that is how it is used in 7430, the only other usage. Now, conventional Orientalist-driven Arabic grammar, their rules would suggest that the numbers 3 to 10 and 13 to 19 cannot agree with the gender of their respective nouns. They actually teach this in Arabic grammar. So for example, if you have a masculine adjective, the noun afterwards has to be a feminine, and vice versa. But that only applies to just these numbers, 3 to 10, 13 to 19. Doesn't apply to 12 or 11 or 1 or 2 or 20 or higher. It doesn't even apply at all for any other adjective in the Arabic language. Why does it only apply to these? That's kind of odd. That shows that there is some kind of a tinkering going on with Arabic, at least the rules of it. Another example would be the baseless idea of quadrilateral roots. All the roots of the Quran, by far, of Arabic even today, are trilateral. 99.99% of them, 3-letter roots, 3 radicals in them. So this is a similar idea where like the grammar just falls short and there's no explanation other than this is just a convention. It's at odds for practically every other adjective which has gender agreement in Arabic. Interestingly, in 1825, that ayah, you do see gender agreement implied because the 9, which is masculine in that ayah, is applied to the masculine plural of ashab al-kahf. So that does indeed agree with the masculine 9 describing them, because it suggests that these numbers were traditionally understood to never have gender agreement, apparently. But what you're seeing is a misunderstanding, because we're really underestimating the information latent in the text, which is here's a possible alternative to this. Maybe, just maybe, the reason why you don't see gender agreement for these sets of numbers between them and their nouns is maybe because it's actually not describing the entire count of the noun that follows. Think about that. What if it's actually describing a partial set of the noun? And that would be indicated by a feminine adjective for a masculine noun, and vice versa. Could that be possible? Would that actually reveal to us some knowledge that's been hidden and buried under arbitrary Arabic grammar rules that we inherited from Orientalists? Possibly, because the overwhelming majority of all adjectives everywhere, feminine has the ha ta marghuta. Masculine doesn't have it. And as you're going to see, they've done the same thing with the word ashara as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. If that's the case, then tes'ata, ashara, makes perfect sense why there's no gender agreement. Why 9 is used for that exact same word in a different case, mind you. Tis'atu rahtin. So let's look at the number 10. I talked about the digits 1 to 9. And what's interesting about this actually creates another problem, because apparently this is the only word I've come across that has a completely irreconcilable masculine-feminine version of the same word. I'm going to explain what I mean. This word right here, ashara, okay? I've labeled them correctly here because that's exactly how Arabic is everywhere else. There's no need to change the rules and bend the rules for this one word like it is in modern dictionaries. This is clearly masculine and this is clearly feminine. But they've done two deceptions in one, and you can check this for yourself. They say that this is actually feminine and its masculine counterpart is right here, which is a different word, as denoted by the sukun. And conversely, this word here, asharati, is actually masculine, and its feminine counterpart is this word, which is a different word, ashr. I just want to expand on some previous comments that kind of led me down this road to find that this is like one of the only circumstances where you can see this. There's no rational explanation other than this is how it is. You have to blindly believe that's what it is. What if, maybe, just maybe, I know I'm not an Arabic speaker, but Arabic will be spoken by everyone anyway. So let's just try to learn, the foundation behind this language, which is the Qur'an. What if these two words are the same, masculine, feminine version? That makes perfect sense. Ashara, asharati. Same basis. And this one is another word. Ashrin, ashrata. That would work with the rest of Arabic. So when you look at the ayahs they're used in, under this rational reconciliatory explanation, what you're going to see is that they mean slightly different things now. These ayahs, at least some of them are more obvious than others, are surrounding this word, ashr, ashrata. Okay? And that's why you'll notice that it means something that's increased by 10. Tenfold, 10 more. Okay? Just take a look for yourself. This one, though, that literally just is spat out as 10. Okay? And that's what we have here. So it conflicts with the understanding of 12, 11, 9. I'm not talking about colloquial Arabic. You can pronounce these numbers in every day, but when you bring this to the Qur'an, you're entering a whole other perspective, Allah's perspective. He made this book completely reconcilable, holistic, without any variance in any part of it. And all the assumed contradictions and variances are just by people that they don't really believe that this is perfect. The written word is perfect. So this trilateral root, actually, if you care to look, Ain Shin Ra, it has the overall meaning of familiarity, association. That's why it's used in words like ma'ashar. And of course the word ma'ashar associates al-jinn and al-ins. So clearly the root has something to do with all life. There's even words from this root that relate to your folk or your kin, your collective group. Okay? The number 10 within this trilateral root would have to be understood to represent something in the creation that's a complete set. The end of all digits. The first number. Okay? That's why it's not actually a coincidence that the number 10 is composed of 1 and 0. All or nothing. 1 over 0 is just infinite. Infinity, undefined. That would describe Allah. Allah is 1, and there was a point where the creation was nothing, didn't exist. However, 0 over 1, that's the creation. It was 0 at one point. So my point is that the scope of the number 10 in Arabic concerns all possible sets, ma'ashar, groupings, residing with them. It makes sense why in Arabic and English numerals, we even base binary code using these symbols as numbers. All or nothing. So, could it be possible that this 9 is a partial count of a complete set of 10? 9 of 10 upon her, upon Saqar. 9 of 10 what? 9 of 10. Of all things. Of all the things that concern this root. One of which is Ma'ashar al-Jinn wal-Insi. Which brings me to this. We see this symbol, strangely, not counted whatsoever in any accurate way because it reveals something. Okay? And the official explanation is that this octagram pattern, Rubu' al-Hizb, that's what it's called, is a 1/8 division of a hizb, which itself is half of a juz in the Qur'an. The entire Qur'an is thereby, according to them, divided into 60 ahzab, or hizbs, and each hizb is further divided into 4 rubu's. This results in a 240 count of this octagram throughout the entire Qur'an. They say the purpose of this is to serve as recitation breaks and memorization aids, helping readers divide the Qur'an into manageable portions for study or liturgical recitation. Wouldn't it be great if that was the actual purpose of it? When in fact, you can count for yourself and find there's exactly 199, not 240. Yes, I know they lied, but that's just what it is. If somebody brings this up to you, they'll probably just deflect from the conversation and say that, well, this was anyway added to the text anyway, it's not from Allah. So they believe the Quran is added to by scribes, essentially. There is no reason to believe human or jinn hands have added to the Quran Mus'haf, if you actually believe in the book. So the pattern revealed by the symbol is definitely intended by Allah to inform the reader of essential information. This is a geometric visualization of the number 199. There's 199 dots centered around 1, and it forms a perfect triangle. A set of 199 can be represented as 2 pairs of 99 around 1. 11 nested triangles with 1 dot in the center, and 12 dots on the outermost triangle on each side. So what if there is this 1:9 ratio of creation between the lowest possible proportion of a complete set, the lowest digit, compared to the highest possible proportion of a complete set and the highest digit? If you go to the story in the Qur'an, 38:21-24, the fact that this symbol is actually mentioned this many times, with using these digits and their proportions, really does speak volumes. The story itself actually starts off with this Rubu' al-Hizb symbol, and it ends with its counterpart, that Sujud Tilawa symbol. I don't think that's an accident. So like I mentioned before, 199 can be represented mathematically in 1 pair of 99s, with only 1 left over. Isn't it interesting that exactly 1 time, especially in this exact ayah that has this symbol starting the story, this is the only place we have these 2 numbers in conjunction compared with 1. Is that an accident? 9 and 90 compared with a single one, 1. This story with Dawood directly relates the numbers used in organizing the total set of octograms in the Qur'an. That shows they have a totally different function. And if you think it's an arbitrary thing to divide 199 into a pair of 99s, this is probably why they came up with the completely arbitrary list of 99 names of Allah. But that's a different topic. I just went in and made a list of all of these ayahs that start with this star. All 199 of them. And what struck me right away is that sometimes, I guess it takes a lot of study to really find the concrete pairs in there, but clearly there is something to this pairing from these pair of 99s, ayahs. And the reason why is this exact concept, this exact type of ayah with this content appeared there exactly twice. Okay? Now it would be 52:24 and 76:19. What are the odds it only appears exactly twice, only with these starred ayahs, and it says basically the same thing? There will circulate among them ghilman. And even the word pearls is used there. The same thing is used for 76:19. That's it. No other ayah with this star on there has this setup, has this content in any other ayah. So that leads me to believe that somewhere along the line, there are 99 ayahs that agree in their content and reference the same story, same thing, same concept, with 99 other ayahs, which leaves only 1 in the middle. So what I'm trying to say was never actually 19. Any way you look at it, there's no word for number. The number used there cannot be 19 in all of its usage. So there's nothing to suggest that this particular one has to be 19. to be consistent and loyal to the Qur'an's precise language. And then at the same time, there are no angels except those that are ashab an-nar, mentioned after that ayah. So, if this number 9 has this connotation when it's used in these ayahs, doesn't that tell you something about the akhirah? Doesn't that tell you something about the proportion of those in the akhirah being perfectly symmetrical? And you can prove that it's 1-9 ratio. It's a comparison of the number 1 to the number 9, the digit 9 to the number digit 1. Because Surah 1 and Surah 9 differ in one important way. And maybe this is something that's not actually understood, because everyone just assumes it's all about the 19 instead of the digits that make up the number 19, which is why it's seen as a code word. Code 19. It's just 1-9. That's all. That equals 10. That's the whole set. And to explain to you about this, there's only 3 places in the entire Qur'an that differ on the placement of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay? And that's Surah 1, Surah 9, and Surah 27. Okay? Surah 1, the Bismillah is the first ayah of Surah Al-Fatiha. It's not used to introduce the surah. It's actually an ayah. It's actually the first ayah of the entire Qur'an. So it's missing the introductory surah, but it uses it as an ayah by itself. Surah 9, again, 1-9, does not have a single reference to Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, nor does it introduce with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That's because that's the only one it doesn't have that. Surah At-Tawbah. Interesting, that's the surah that those that follow the 19 remove 2 ayahs from. And there's one other example, which is again different. It's kind of a synthesis of the 2. Surah 27 is like all the other 112 surahs in the sense that it's introducing its surah with Bismillah, but then also it has in the story those words within an ayah, not by itself, within the story, the dialogue. And that's in 27:30. It says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The fact that there is a comparison to be made in something as practically ubiquitous as the Bismillah for surahs 1 and 9 proves that Allah is making a direct distinction between those exact digits. And this is why it's a huge topic of contention. Is the Bismillah preserved? Is the Bismillah an ayah? Is it not an ayah? Is it part of the Quran? Was it added by companions? It's part of the Quran. It's exactly where it's meant to be. End of story. I find it also interesting that just by coincidence, a unique Bismillah is within a surah that's numbered as a multiple of 9. 27. Or more precisely, 9 plus 9 plus 9. It lends credence to the whole obsession with 666 as part and parcel with how the Quran exposes assumptions. So, doesn't it make sense? If you read throughout the Quran, the majority are astray, they're ignorant, they're like worse than cattle, they earn hellfire, they eat as ashab an-nar and their bellies like gluttonously. Doesn't it make sense? The human beings represent the 9 portions of hell. 9 of 10 of humanity. With the remaining 1 being the 1 portion from the jinn, the Shayātīn. Doesn't it make sense that the 9 portions of jinn, who have the same root in their name as Jannah, would ultimately reside in Jannah? And the 1 portion of ins, the minority, overwhelming minority, would reside in Jannah. Doesn't that make sense? See, I have here jinn on the left, ins on the right. This is why al-jinnati wan-nas are opposite proportions. Al-jinnati is a little piece of all the jinn. And an-nas is the overwhelming masses and crowds of all of humanity. So that's why every time hell is referenced, Jahannam, in those ayahs, it says, min al-jinnati wan-nas. What's so profound is that the very first ayah of the Qur'an talks about the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which points to this 1-9 comparison by the chapter titles, by the chapter number, rather. And the very last ayah of the Qur'an talks about the proportions in Jahannam. Min al-jinnati wan-nas. There is no coincidence. 9 of 10, 90%, 9 portions. That's a perfect majority. Because, you see, the plural in Arabic starts at 3, quantity of 3. This is 3 times 3, which gives you the highest digit. The perfect majority to justify everything that Allah judges in the end. But it has to be 19 because it has to be. It just has to be. That's how we say 19 in Arabic. But then you understand, if it's irrefutable that Ashab an-Nar are companions, not keepers, if you care to be consistent, are there only 19 immortal companions of the fire? Only 19 people deserved hellfire. When one of the most obvious things from the Qur'an is most of the people enter Jahannam in the end. Which brings me to the Surah At-Tawbah conspiracy. And I just want to mention this and end on this because I'm done with the excuses for rejecting Allah's ayat. This is the one that apparently is the death knell for the 19 code, which is why it was originally removed. And apparently the 19 code is so perfect, more perfect than the Qur'an were given, apparently, that even the Qur'an was not spared by the 19 code. Such that ayahs 128 and 129, the ultimate ayahs of Surah 9, are seen as inauthentic. And I'm going to explain to you why that's ridiculous. So here are the list of here's a list of how we can dispel the excuses for rejecting Allah's 2 ayat, or any ayat, but in particular these 2. There's nothing to suggest, if you pay attention to the Arabic, not the translations. Translations confuse us all the time. They'll get you to believe your Qareen is an angel, or your Qareen is a god, or that God is the same in the Bible and the same in the Qur'an, or that jinn are angels or angels are jinn. That's what the translations can accomplish. They're a type of hadith, lahul hadith. But there's nothing to suggest from Arabic, from 9:128, that these 2 descriptors, Ra'uf and Rahim, are not, in fact, describing what is conventionally understood to represent Allah. And I'll show you. Point 2. The word Rahim, just by itself, is already a descriptor that's not even only in singular. There's one time that it's used in plural. Ruhama'u in 48:29, meaning compassionate ones. Unless the 19 adherents want to also reject this ayah. And keep in mind, this ayah starts off with Muhammad Rasulullah. So Rahim is already proven to apply to more than just Allah. Obviously, Allah is the ultimate. But that's my point. This is an excuse. There's absolutely no reason to also throw away the final ayah, 9:129, because there is actually nothing wrong, according to their logic, their false logic, with that ayah, other than the fact that it just continues the previous ayah. which is shameless, absolutely shameless, that they would reject an actual ayah on false premises just because of where it comes in the order. It comes after an uncomfortable ayah, so they reject it as well. The traditionally understood translation of 9:128 is done deceptively, and I'll show you why. And I think this is perhaps to omit a second person mentioned alongside a messenger, so that would impact the entire context of what the ayah discusses. How convenient that if you fall for this, you lose critical information and you gloss over one of Allah's ayat as just inauthentic, forged, fabricated. What's very interesting, and really the cherry on the top, is that Surah 9, Ayah 127, okay, this is the falsely claimed final ayah of Surah 9. It actually, just by coincidence, discusses people that deny in the context of a surah being brought to them. Which is interesting because rejecting the next two ayahs, as per the 19er adherents, would compromise the integrity of the entire surah as a whole. How perfect that it comes after this idea. So let me tell you why that maybe this is taken out. So the idea is that this is the ayah of contention, and it says apparently, at least in this translation, something along the same lines. There has certainly come to you a messenger from among yourselves. Grievous to him is what you suffer. He is concerned over you, and to the believers is kind and merciful. Well, that's very interesting because let's just take that as, as it is. Is that supposed to suggest that's all about this messenger that's certainly come to you? Okay. Here's a preliminary translation effort. For already he has arrived to you all, an emissary, from your souls, one honorable upon it of what distressed you, all of one greedy upon you all, by the confiders of one kind, of one compassionate. My point in demonstrating it this way is to show you something that was missing and lost in the translation, which is a second party alongside this messenger. So if we make sense of what the Arabic says, it says first, for already he has arrived to you, all, an emissary. Okay? By the way, there is no punctuation in the Arabic. Sometimes there are tajweed markings, which tend to represent pauses or asides, or it's unclear exactly which ones symbolize what, but at least by conventional translations, it's understood that these tajweed markings are to be understood with pausing, because that's how they're recited today. But there's no pauses in there, which is why I put it all in one sentence, so that I don't arbitrarily and subjectively use my whims and desires to just cut off the speech of Allah when it suits me. Then, once you understand what's going on, then you can adapt it for an English-speaking reader. But you first have to figure out, what does the raw text say? What's interesting about this is the word وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ is actually used exactly 2 more times. And it's used for Musa and for Yusuf. Okay? Keep in mind that the messenger's name is actually mentioned in 61:6. That's just upside down 919. These are the games that people play with these numbers because of their similarity in how they look. That's how the code is used. But regardless of that, that's what Isa, in Allah's words, he says and identifies the title of this messenger, of this book, Ahmad. Okay? But what I want to show you is that وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ is used for Musa and Yusuf. Musa and Yusuf. Okay? Continuing on. From your souls, is one honorable upon it. That's what aziz means. It has a positive connotation. Not grievous. Interestingly, they translate aziz to grievous when all throughout the Quran everyone understands it to be honorable or almighty or anything like that. Upon it of what distressed you all, of one greedy upon you all. So, like I mentioned, aziz is a positive word associated with Allah and Yusuf and the person called Al-Aziz as a title. Interesting how a name of Allah can actually be used for a person in the Quran, like Al-Malik, Al-Aziz. Interesting. But then we have this word Haris. Haris with a sad. This is a word that's associated with greediness because in Surah 2, Ayah 96, Allah talks about Ahrasa an-nas, the greediest of the masses of humanity, upon hayat. And he's from alladhina ashraku. Even if his life is extended 1,000 years. Okay? These are the takeaways from that ayah about this adjective. Doesn't this resemble the traits of someone like Fir'aun, who the messenger was sent to, like Musa was sent to from before? It says, if you don't believe me, go to 73:15. It tells you right there, we sent a messenger like what we sent of a messenger to Fir'aun. The next ayah says, but Fir'aun denied the Rasul. These connections completely destroy the narrative we're sold about our history and definitely, most certainly, the Quran's context. And finally, we see the last ayah, the last part of the ayah, by the mu'mineen of one kind, of one compassionate. You see, there's no ofs. There's no Arabic word for of. It's implied. Just like there's no subject pronouns in pretty much all the verbs because it's actually conjugated and telling you what it is. This actually fits with the rest of the ayahs that identify Allah with these positive words since they are mu'mineen of Allah. Okay? That's why it says al-mu'mineen. Mu'mineen Allah. There's zero proof, zero excuse to remove this ayah. This is a shameless excuse. And I think it's a conspiracy because that one word is used only once and it's only in this ayah apparently. And that word is haris. This is actually phonetically very similar to the word Christ. Yep, Christ does not mean Masih. I can say that confidently. Instead, Haris is related to Karis, Christo, Harist. This is how most people in the world pronounce Christ. The Quran seems to point to the Pharaonic roots of Judeo-Christianity. In Surah Yusuf, we put the bread and the wine and crucifixion, all there. And this is prior to Jesus, okay? The Bible's Jesus is prior to that. Even Joseph or Yusuf, that predates Isa by many years in the official chronology. We see in the Quran that Fir'aun is the one that crucifies. Fir'aun is the one in the Quran that's served, worshipped as a god in the flesh. Just like Christians do today with the Jasus Haris. Oh, so that's where they get the name, isn't it? Jasus, okay, that's used once. That word is used in a verb in the Quran in Surah 49. And it says, La tajassasu. That means, not could you spy. Okay? And haris is used only once in this ayah. You know the la tajassasu, the origin of this pronunciation, jasus, Jesus, Jesu? That's actually in the same ayah about cannibalism. And interestingly enough, in Surah Yusuf, the ingredients of modern Christianity today is all Egyptian. It's all Pharaonic. The bread, actually, in the vision of Yusuf, is flesh, human flesh. The wine is analogous in Surah Yusuf to blood. And what's interesting is that in 930, we have this idea of Ibn Allah associated with Osiris. In Arabic, that word is Uzair. That's a personal name. But it was encoded in our fake history as Osiris, Lazarus, and Ezra. There's no evidence of a prophet Ezra in the Qur'an. There is evidence of some person called Uzair of very significant value. And this person is only an ayah where the Yahud equate him to Ibn Allah. Okay? Fir'aun is the one that demands child sacrifice. That's exactly like the God in the Bible in the New Testament. Demands child sacrifice from his only son, apparently, his son of God. There are so many more things I can talk about, but there's no coincidence that the cult that follows Rashad Khalifa, that they actually understand the Bible to be mainly true. There's no coincidence that they concluded that. When they also reject residue of the origin from Arabic, the mother tongue, of the current modern word for Christ. Haris, Hristo, Harasat. Okay? Ahrasat. There's no coincidence. And with that, I just want to remind you, Allah taught the human that which he could not know. The Quranic knowledge is beyond your needs and desires, your fashion preference, your religious tourism, your health and cleanliness, your rituals, your rites and ceremonies, your holidays, your community obligations, your political ideologies, your personal bank account, and also your esoteric obsessions. Thank you very much for listening if you made it this far. And salamun alaikum. Peace.